The book is about a race. It's a race around Florida. It was designed by a former Marine who got this idea to have a small boat race over distance. The great thing about these races is that there is no there is no stopping and starting. This is a 1,200-mile race around the entire state of Florida, and you start at Tampa Bay, the entrance of Tampa Bay. You finish at the entrance to Tampa Bay. It's up to you to decide how far you're going to go each day. You don't have to stop, you don't have to eat, you don't have to sleep, but at some point those things are going to be necessary. You can go as far and as fast as you can, and that's generally the idea. One of the race rules is that you cover 30 miles. You cover the entire distance, 1,200 miles, in 30 days or less. To do this in a month means you're going to cover 40 miles a day on average, regardless of what happens. That's a pretty good pace in a kayak. The race is open to small boats, meaning kayaks, canoes, small sailboats. The year I did it, this was done in 2006. It was the first year this race was run. 10 boats participated. 3 kayaks, 6 expedition canoes. These are canoes that were designed by Verlin Kruger, who was a paddler in Michigan. So there's 6 expedition canoes. 4 of those canoes were fitted with pontoons and a full sail and a dagger board, so they were able to sail. The others were just paddled, and they had a downwind sail. And there was a shallow draft sailboat. It was designed and built by the guy who was sailing it. Let's see, to give you at these events, when I go as a reader to an event by an author, I always want to hear a little bit of the voice, the author's voice. So I want to hear a little bit of that author reading. And I know, they tell you never read, never read from your book. But I'm going to break that rule, and I'm going to read a little bit. You can tell me later whether I made a tremendous mistake. But it should give you a little bit of a feeling for my voice, the voice that's in the book. Now this is of course a nonfiction book. This is the story of this race and my participation in the race. But it's actually 2 stories. When I finished the race, so I'm standing here, so I survived. When I finished the race, I had agreed to write a magazine piece for Sea Kayaker magazine, since I was competing in a sea kayak. And I did. I wrote this piece for them. They ran it. They liked it. But afterward, I didn't feel like it got to the essence of what it meant for me to have done this. And so I went back to my computer and kept writing and exploring what it meant to do this, to travel these distances, to travel at least 40 miles a day, every day, to travel late into the night, to paddle 14 hours, 16 hours, 18 hours without touching land. You start in the morning, you finish at night. To paddle well through the night, to get up in the middle of the night and paddle into the dawn. That's what this race is about. It's about getting in the boat and keeping moving forward. It's about when you feel that you're so tired that you just can't go any farther. Where do you find the strength to keep moving? It's about that. Well, the piece I did for Sea Kayaker didn't really touch on that. It didn't really get to the essence of it. So I started exploring it. And what happened is this book emerged. And so instead of just the travel narrative, in other words, instead of just having you have a seat in the back of my boat to see what I saw, experience what I saw, the book began to emerge as a memoir, which means that you're not just seeing what I'm seeing, but you're thinking what I'm thinking. You can understand what it is that I'm thinking and experiencing as I'm doing it. And to do that, there's background in my life and what I've been through. That involves, and so there's a lot for me, because I'm actually not I'm a private person, and so writing this amount of personal detail was difficult for me. But there's a lot in the book about things that I went through and endured, and so so it's fair to look at this story as maybe the race is a metaphor for how a man gets through a certain time in his life. So I'm going to read just these are very short passages, fear not. This is at the beginning. This is the second chapter. It's entitled Happy Birthday. Some time ago, having arrived at the middle years of my life with little to show for it but a thriving bald spot and a flatulent 17-year-old Toyota, I decided to do something completely nuts. I entered a race. It was a 50th birthday present to myself, one of those well-intentioned but somewhat desperate attempts to stir things up a bit, to get the blood flowing again. This was no ordinary race. It was a contest for small boats, circumnavigating the entire state of Florida. I never actually got out a map and measured it, but the event organizer made a big deal out of the fact it would be 1,200 miles of round-the-clock racing. I know. These things rarely end well. I could already hear the thwack, thwack, thwack of the Coast Guard helicopter. The newscaster would include something like, "Details are sketchy. The man apparently had a huge bald spot and owned a 1989 Toyota with an inoperative muffler." I didn't care. What did I have to lose? I've been a newspaper reporter for 28 years, so I have intimate knowledge of failure, doom, and destruction. I've covered suicides, fatal house fires, and bloody car wrecks, and I've learned a few things. Call it reporter's wisdom. For example, always wear your seatbelt, keep fresh batteries in your smoke detector, and if you really, really want to kill yourself by drowning in the river but would like to spare your family the grief of having to identify the stinking, bloated corpse, don't wear underwear with an identifying laundry label. Trust me on this. That's just the easy stuff. The hardest part about being in journalism is working with newsroom managers, willing to throw reporters under a train if necessary to manage their own relentless march toward that corner office. I've worked for a few. Through much of it, I had the last laugh. Every night I went home from work to a beautiful woman and a smart, talented son in a 4-bedroom piece of heaven with a swimming pool in the backyard. It's no exaggeration when I tell you I was the luckiest man alive. Then, one day, it disappeared, just vanished. When the judge stamped the divorce final, I felt as if I was free-falling into a giant vat of Kool-Aid. I didn't know what to do or whom to trust. Of course, I wasn't the only one. If you can believe what you read in the papers, 1 of every 2 American marriages ends in divorce. They even have a proper name for my condition. Apparently it's called a midlife crisis. Some men buy a Corvette, grow a mustache, and start dating bosomy 20-somethings. Not me. I entered a race. So in fact, I did enter a race, and I signed up for the race, and the first thing that happens as soon as you sign up is you wake up the next morning and you think, what was I thinking? I mean, every possible problem comes up, every possible thing that might happen. Now, of course, and it didn't help that my race name, you have to select a race name for this. So my race name was Shark Chow. So you think about every possible thing that can get, you're really looking for a reason not to do it. You're looking for an excuse now that you've committed to doing it. So about a month before the race, the race is first week in March. It was Super Bowl Sunday. I was training. And basically, to train for this kind of thing, you load up your boat, you get it a little heavier than it really will be during the race, and you go out and you paddle like hell. You just keep paddling and paddling and paddling, and then you go home and go back the next day and paddle some more. Well, I was out doing that, and a boat pulled out, a power boat pulled out in front of me, and I had to jam my paddle in to stop the boat very quickly. And something gave out in my left shoulder. And I thought at the time, no big deal. I kept going. I was warm and I could keep the boat moving. But by that evening, it seemed this was really a problem. And as the week progressed, that shoulder really became a serious problem. I couldn't train. And so I had to lay off all training prior to the race. And it really gave me a serious and good excuse to back out of this. But I mention that because it's part of the obstacle of doing this. Maybe the biggest part of the obstacle to doing this is mental. It's how you approach it mentally. If you don't think you can do it, you probably won't be able to do it. Anyway, so I'll read you another section. This is very short, but it's along these lines. Mental attitude approaching the race. This chapter is entitled Death. I wish I could say my decision to enter the race was made without the slightest hesitation. I wish I could say I never felt a molecule of doubt. I wish I could say I was actually looking forward to the event. That would not be entirely accurate. Just between you and me, I dreaded the idea of paddling all the way around Florida. First, a sea kayak is a cramped, uncomfortable place to live for a month. You don't believe me? Try this little experiment. Go into your bathroom. Load up your bathtub with all the stuff you think you might need for a month of camping under the stars. Then crawl inside. Carefully position the gear so that it cuts off pretty much all blood flow to your legs and feet. Now every 2 to 3 hours, turn on the shower to properly replicate an authentic level of rash-inducing wetness. And then sit there amid your perpetually moist and increasingly malodorous gear for the next month. Here's my point. You'd have to be an idiot to actually look forward to this. And that's just issue number one, comfort. Now consider issue number 2, death. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I gave issue number 2 a great deal of thought. I imagined every possible fatal opportunity. Call it Murphy's Law anticipated or Darwin's Law about to be enforced. For some reason, one vision kept returning to me, that I'd end up a steaming pile of goo emerging from the smelly end of some large, toothy creature. Chief, now that's the guy who thought up this race. His name is Steve Isaac. He's an ex-Marine. And the race is patterned on a variation of military training. The idea is basically pound the hell out of you until you can't take any more, and then start training. Chief didn't help matters much. He seemed to take great delight in the array of nasties that might befall his exalted challengers. There's method to his fear-mongering, though. He wants to warn potential challengers. He also minimizes any legal liability to himself. He's smart enough to know that pretty much anyone who enters such a race could easily end up strapped to a hospital bed with a perpetual trickle of drool flowing onto a pillow. Warning, warning, warning. This is a dangerous event, Chief announces on the Water Tribe website. Do not attempt to enter this event unless you are an expert in the small boat of your choice. Then he adds this helpful reminder. Even if you are a well-prepared expert, you may die. There it is. The challenge has been laid down. The stakes are established. It's kind of like a bumper sticker that's popular with some sea kayakers. Paddle or die. Deep down, it actually feels more like paddle and die. Consider the possibilities. 10 fatal things to look forward to during the Florida Challenge. 1. Swept out to sea and never heard from again. 2. Struck by bolt of lightning. 3. Attacked by shark that bites through the entire kayak to enjoy tasty human filling. 4. Mistaken for a manatee and run over by sport fishing boat. 5. Crushed lifeless by oversexed Burmese python. 6. Fall asleep while paddling, capsize and drown. 7. Eaten by alligator. 8. Eaten by 6 or 7 alligators. 9. While paddling past Miami, shot by stray small arms fire from minor traffic accident. 10. Bad piece of beef jerky. Now, there's one thing that I should mention. So I start the race. In fact, I do get to the launch beach, and I do launch, and I'm moving down the coast, and in fact, my shoulder is bothering me. It's painful. And so when you do this kind of thing, when you're going to cover 1,200 miles in a month in a sea kayak, parts of that trip are going to hurt. It's just going to hurt. But the deal is, the challenge is, well, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to deal with it? Well, I took it pretty much, at the beginning, I took it several hundred yards at a time. When I first went off the beach, I didn't know if I'd make it across the shipping channel. The race starts on Mullet Key, the entrance to Tampa Bay. There's a shipping channel that runs into the bay, and you have to cross that channel and then head down towards Sarasota. I just didn't know if I was going to be able to make it across, but I was going to try. So I did, in fact, get across that channel. By the time I got 2.5 days into the race, I'm down here in Everglades National Park, and I'm just off Indian Key. You guys are, if any of you have been in Everglades National Park, you know this area. But the reason I remember this so vividly is I get to Indian Key, and I'm moving along, and I suddenly, my shoulder's starting to feel pretty good, and I just started thinking about I mentioned that I had been through this divorce. In the meantime, I had a girlfriend, and so I get to Indian Key, and out of nowhere comes this idea, gee, I think I can do this. I think I can actually make it. And then this idea, if I make it all the way around and get back to this point, and my girlfriend's on the beach, I'll drop to a knee and propose marriage right then. The reason that's important is because it set the stage for what would become a meditation, a debate about marriage and the importance of marriage and divorce and what divorce can do to you, and children, what happens in at this stage of life. And so it kind of set the tone. And so the book discusses that as well, because if any of you have spent any amount of time alone in a small boat, you know that if there's anything that's not quite right in your life, it will come to the surface. It won't take very long. It'll come to the surface. And when it comes to the surface, you'd better be prepared to deal with it. So, let's see. I have a few. We'll go to questions. And incidentally, if you've got any questions, just raise your hand and we'll go right to the questions. I'm going to run through a few photographs so you can see what some of the boats look like and what my boat looked like. And
if you just hit left and right, it'll...
okay. Okay. So you know, this is the race. Let's see. Now, these I'm just not technically proficient here. But so there's going to be a little out of order, but I'll explain what they are. This is right up here. This is right in here. This is the Swanee River, and this is what the world looks like from the perspective of a kayaker. There's always a little triangle right there. And so if I was walking down the street, I would see and I'm a kayaker, I would see the world sort of like that. This is coming down the Swanee River. This is the approach to Miami, coming across Biscayne Bay. It's a very long crossing. The water is crystal clear, maybe 20 feet visibility straight down. And this is one of the racers. That's a Kruger expedition canoe with pontoons and a full sail. And I took this from my kayak. And I'm unlike the Kruger, I don't have the pontoons, so to stay up, I have to paddle. His race name is Manitou Cruiser. He is actually the guy who builds those boats. This is what I took. And so, let's see. What I did was I made my own version of sort of what the military uses, meals ready to eat. I put in a bag each meal so that all I'd have to do is go in, because a lot of this happens late at night in the dark. And so I could reach in and pull out a meal and everything would be there. I used backpacker meals, two-person backpacker meals, and I would eat the whole thing. You're burning more calories than you can take in, so you lose weight, but you've got to keep. You have to think of food intake like coal in a furnace, and you have to keep eating small meals throughout the day. Let's see. Anyway, there's the equipment. The other thing I didn't mention about this race is, to race around Florida in a small boat is a difficult thing because Florida's not an island. But what you can do is, there's a river, the St. Mary's River, that runs up here, and the Swanee River runs down here. And so there's this portion right here. That's the only portion that you can't paddle. And so under the race rules, you have to portage it, which means that you carry your boat from there to there. Or you do something smarter, which is to carry a folding cart. And so I had a cart that folded up, and I assembled the cart. I put the boat on the back on the cart, and I had a backpack. I tied it to the bow of the boat, and I pulled the boat from here to there. It's 40 miles.
How long did that take?
It took me a day and a half. In fact, my walking speed was not too far off my on-water average speed. So it wasn't too bad. But some of the other competitors took a small bicycle because they had a bigger cargo. I mean, this is my boat. I couldn't fit a bicycle in there, and I wouldn't want to carry that extra weight. But that's how I did it.
Not a lot of padding on that seat.
Oh, these are the seat pads. I had two, and this is a thermarest blow up, and this is one of those car seats that's synthetic to try to fast drying. Very important thing, the seat. Okay, again, this is the Swanee. This is the launch beach. This was the launch on the day of the race. A lot of these boats aren't doing, there were only 10 boats in the race around Florida. A lot of these boats are doing a 300-mile race from here to here. It's called the Everglades Challenge, and that race is run every year. And so a lot of these sailboats are in that race. Only 10 of the boats on the shore were in the Florida Challenge. And incidentally, in 2 weeks, this race, this Everglades Challenge race, will be held in Florida. You can follow it if you go online. The website is www.watertribe.com. And there, unlike the year that I did this, now they require you to have a transmitter on your boat. So each boat has a transmitter. It's a spot transmitter. And you can go on this website. There'll be an interactive map. You can click on the boats and you can see where the boats are. Every 20 minutes it sends up a signal, a position report on each boat. And I'm in this race in 2 weeks. And so if you click on the thing and it says Shark Chow, that's me in 2 weeks. And so root for me. or pray. Or both.
Warren, what year was this that you did?
This was in 2006. And so this was, they did it in 2006, they did it again last year, and the next one will be in 2012. It'll be next year. And so anybody who wants to sign up for the race, there's plenty of time to train and come out and do it. Or to do this, or to do the Everglades Challenge, which will be every year.
Do you recommend it to your friends?
I do. It's a fantastic thing. If you enjoy long distance kayaking, and if you like the idea of competing in a race where you decide when you're going to go and how far you're going to go, if you don't mind paddling long hours in the dark alone, the thing about it is you can do it with somebody else, but a lot of the things that are in the book won't happen. If you're with somebody else, the experience will be different. But if you do it by yourself and you encounter all this stuff alone, no one who does this, no one who sets out on this thing finishes the same person. Everybody comes back different. And it's an interesting thing when you read a book. It's a good idea to figure out whether or not the person in the beginning of the book is the person at the end of the book. And there's a hint here about one of the things to look for. And I have a little quote before the beginning. It's a quote from William Faulkner, a great American author. "The basest of all things is to be afraid." And Faulkner was really talking about writing, but he could have been talking about anything. He could have been talking about this. What he's really talking about fear. But the quote, I love this quote, "The basest of all things is to be afraid," because he's correct. if you think about it. All right, this is me right here at Cedar Key. I am 124 miles from the finish.
Unshaven.
Okay, this is downtown Miami, and with Manitou. We came together across Biscayne Bay, and we came up into downtown Miami, up Biscayne Bay, just as the sun was coming down. And here we stopped on a spoil island in the middle of the bay, sort of figuring out what we were going to do after that. That's him. He's the builder of those boats. Really nice guy. That's him arriving in Key Largo. And that's him leaving Cedar Key. This is the launch. This is the bridge over the bay in Tampa Bay.
Warren,
Yeah.
what time of the year did you do this? I mean, what?
It's the first weekend in March.
Okay.
Is the race starts. And so this would have been March into April.
Okay. And also, did you paddle in the evening because you found there were certain tides that were more suitable for you, or was it to avoid the heat, or what sort of determined which hours of the night or day that you paddled?
There aren't enough hours in the day. And so if you want to cover that distance, if I had it in me to go another half mile, I would go another half mile. My mindset was that I'm going to go and I'm going to push right to the edge. I am going to push right to the edge. And that's what I did. And so you would get to a point when you would be done. You would be toast. And then you would need to find a place to stay. And there are some times when you couldn't find a place to stay. And so and it's middle of the night, cold front coming through, that's part of the deal. You keep moving, you have to find something more. You've gone a tremendous distance. You've gone longer than the vast majority of people who ever get into one of these boats go. And you've done it day after day after day. So part of what you're doing is sort of figuring out who you are. And I will never have the same concept of a lot of different things: fear, distance in a boat. And the other side, about half the story, because the question is, well, what do you do when you get to that point? You have to come to some recognition of where strength comes from. You really have to figure that out. And what I figured out was that your strength doesn't come from your arms. It really comes from your heart and from your mind. And I'll give you an example. I mentioned about my girlfriend and this idea that if she's at the finish, now of course she works in Washington, D.C. She's not coming to Florida. And she doesn't know what I'm thinking in the boat as I'm going around the state. But the fact is, when you do this kind of thing, or anything, if you're out in some level of peril, you're gonna fall back on relationships, and it's those relationships that are going to get you through. This is my view. And I'll give you an example from the book, and this is only a few paragraphs, but what happened is,
I have to ask, was she there when you finished?
Well, you have to read that. But what would happen is I would have a series of conversations with her while I was in the boat, alone. Some of them were verbal. Some of them were just thoughts. But it's a very important, I couldn't advise somebody to do this, but I can tell you that this is what helped me get through. And I'll give you, this is just a few paragraphs, but it'll give you an idea. So I'm right here. It's about 4 in the morning. And I'm moving south on the Swanee River, and I know that there's a front that's coming. And I know that there are going to be bands of wind and rain, and I'm heading into it. It's dark, and you're headed straight in. You can't see, you're on the water, and you're just going into the dark.
How did you know the weather was coming in the dark?
Oh, because you monitor the weather. You monitor.
Or you have a little radio contraption?
Yeah, in the gear list, I have a VHF radio, and you can flip it on to weather. It gives you NOAA weather all the time, and it's smart to keep an eye on the weather. By the time you get into it, you're living outside. You're living in the weather, and you can spot. You can feel it. It's interesting how easy it is to see. The wind will drop. As soon as, they talk about the calm before the storm. Oh, yeah. But in this case, I knew that it was a really serious situation, and because I was considering staying up on shore and wading through it. But I decided to go straight down. So I'm about here. It's about 4 in the morning. And this chapter is called The First. Remember the National Gallery of Art? It was sort of like a dare, sort of like a date, but really only lunch. We ate in the atrium, Caesar salad or something, iced tea. We both had to get back to the office, deadlines, calls to make. I didn't want to go anywhere. We walked through the halls slowly, looking at the paintings, but not really seeing anything. I wondered who you were, a savior or an assassin. I wondered if this thing started between us, how it would end. With slammed doors, another massive hemorrhage from my meager bank account. Why did there have to be an ending? Each step echoed in the giant halls, and my heart too. In my head, a debate raged. Finally, I surrendered. I don't even know what the painting was. I stopped there for purely selfish reasons. This spot was just out of the line of sight of the docent, as secluded as you could get in a museum filled with priceless works of art. I had to do it. If I didn't, I knew I'd regret it, perhaps for the rest of my life. Do you remember? That little kiss? That first kiss? Lasted maybe a few seconds, but thinking about it, I don't know that it ever really ended. So this is me heading out of Cedar Key, again for that last push down the coast. That's my number and my name.
007.
Yeah, they gave me that because I think at that time I was stealthy. Okay, this is the launch beach. This is the beginning of the race, and this is my boat. Now this actually was in the Everglades Challenge. This surf ski. But anyway, that gives you an idea. A whole bunch of small boats. Now in 2 weeks, we're going to have. It's going to look like this, except we've got 71 boats doing this race in 2 weeks. And that's probably twice as many as we had this year. So it's going to be quite a thing to see. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing the mess on the beach, and when we launch, it's just going to be a giant churn of white water.
So, Warren, it is a race, so is there a handicap for, kayakers versus the guys in sailboats?
Oh, I wish.
Makes it fair.
It's not fair. No, it's just an all-out race. You go with, you pick the boat. Now I picked this boat because that's the boat I had, and I wanted to do it, and so I showed up in this boat. Now, but the question is, and this is a great question, because you've seen some of the boats. Some of them are sailboats. Some of them are, in fact, I've got to show you. There are sailboats. There are canoes. There are kayaks. How is it possible I will tell you this. There were 3 boats in this race. What happens is once you push off, the field will narrow, the field will spread out, and there'll be a group, and you will see and meet up with the same people over and over again. They'll go ahead, you'll come up to them, you'll go ahead, they'll come up. It happens in every race. You'll hit a pace, and your pace will be about the same as others. So there were 3 boats that were at the front of the pack. One of them was Manitou in that boat with the sail. One of them was the shallow draft sailboat, which I'll show you a picture of it. And one of them was a sea kayak. The sea kayak.
007.
And so the question is, well, how could a sea kayak be competitive with with essentially 2 sailboats? And the answer is that the course itself, if you can get from here to here and be close enough to the sailboats, because the sailboats have an advantage all the way to here, but in the rivers, a paddle boat, a kayak would have a tremendous advantage, because these are narrow rivers, and up here the current is coming against you. It's flowing out to sea. And then on the Swanee, the same thing. It doesn't really get wide until down here, but you really don't get much wind. And so it's a paddle race from here to here. And then then the question is, well, what are the conditions here? And so that can be where the race is determined. And so you can read the book and find this out, but I will tell you that there were 3 boats all within striking distance, and it was a race in every sense. Let's see. So this is, I mentioned my left shoulder. This is the first paddle stroke off the beach at the start, using my left shoulder. It's the second paddle stroke, but it's the first one using my left shoulder. This is the shallow draft sailboat, and it's tiny. Now, when this race started, his race name is Wizard. His real name is Matt Layden. He's a mega yacht designer. He lives in Stuart, Florida. But he designed and built this boat in his backyard. And the cool thing about the boat, it's shallow draft. There's no keel. Instead, he built out of the sides, right over here, you can sort of see it, the little wings that come out. And so when it heels over, that's the keel. And when
Like
it heels,
an outrigger kind of idea.
yeah, sort of, yeah. And what he would do is scull, and he could scull at about 2 to 3 knots. And he's sculling here at the beginning to get out, and then he'd put his sail up. Now, the thing about Wizard is that he can go long distances without sleeping, and sometimes he'll go far offshore and he'll sleep for about 15 minutes. And he'll wake up, and he'll look up, and then he'll go back and sleep for another 15 minutes. And so he keeps moving in this little boat. There's a great... now, one of the advantages that Wizard had was, well, for one, he's completely fearless. But he could put his sail up and keep going. Well, his strategy was to get from here to here faster than anybody. And the one way to do it is to get over to the Gulf Stream, which is about 10 miles out. The Gulf Stream moves about 4 miles an hour north. If you can get into it, that's a nice push. So he comes out of Biscayne Bay and heads to the Gulf Stream in this. And the wind had shifted around. It was coming from the southeast, and there were big swells. He is headed straight out, and apparently somebody sees him, right? They don't know that his name is Wizard. They don't know that he built this boat. They don't know that he knows what he's doing. They don't know anything about him. They just, you can imagine the radio report coming into the Coast Guard. There's a man in a refrigerator with a pole, and he's about 4 miles offshore, and you guys got to get out here. Well, so Wizard actually tells this story, and it's pretty funny. He's moving toward the Gulf Stream, and the Coast Guard shows up.
They all think he's Cuban, right?
No, he's going the wrong way. Anything pointed east is they don't care. But the conditions were such that the boat comes up, and when he goes down into the trough, he disappears. So the boat disappears. So it's like this. So the Coast Guard shows up, and they say, Captain, are you happy? And they don't have the slightest idea. They don't know. But I know Matt really well, and he couldn't have been happier. He was exactly where he wanted to be, and he knew exactly what he was doing. And so he basically said, yeah, I am. And I've got this and this and this. He said, look, I've got an EPIRB. These races can sound dangerous, but the equipment list is loaded with all the stuff that the Coast Guard would want you to have. You've got to have a PFD, you've got to have a life jacket, you've got to have an EPIRB or some kind of satellite signaling device if you get into trouble. That's where they send the Coast Guard helicopter with the diver. And you only push that button when you've lost a limb. They expect you to be pretty close to death. But we got that stuff. We carry it because, we're not idiots. We may be stupid, but we're not idiots. So he's out there. So he shows them all this stuff, and they're like, "Yeah, well, he's got everything." So he convinces them. He gets out there and starts along the Gulf Stream. But they told him he has to report in every hour. So he calls the Coast Guard every hour, and essentially, this is whatever he was, white sailboat. I'm doing fine. Anyway, you can imagine back at Coast Guard headquarters, they're like, what? There's a debate going on. You let him do what? Because the conditions out in the Atlantic at that point were really pretty horrendous. The wind was coming pretty strong from the southeast, and so there were really waves and chop. And anyway,
Did they know a race was going on?
They haven't. No. We don't want them to think about that stuff. No, but they ordered him to come back in to the intercoastal waterway. And now the conditions in the ocean were rough enough that I knew that I wasn't going to go out there, because in a sea kayak it's too much. Under different conditions, I would be out in the ocean really fast. because you can really move under the right conditions. But under the wrong conditions, or if you're out there and the conditions change, getting into an inlet can be difficult and dangerous. So I knew I was going to be coming up the ICW. What we didn't know is that he was ordered in. And so Manitou and me were right behind him. He was about here. We were right here. You saw the picture of Manitou approaching Miami. So we thought he was out here just flying up the coast, but in fact he was in the ICW in front of us. And that's one of the reasons why there was a race, because it slowed him down. So this is on the Swanee, right here. And this is, that's me, looking very thin, and Manitou. So, we're there.
Did you have a SAG support, or did you carry your entire month's worth of food with you?
No, under the rules, you could resupply at the checkpoints.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the checkpoints, we were allowed to have a tub.
Mm-hmm.
And I threw backpacker meals into the tub. And so I would get to the checkpoint and I'd take out like 7 more meals,
Mm-hmm.
and then keep going. And water, and you get more water. And
Is that the red X's?
yeah, the red X's. So in the so there are checkpoints down to Key Largo. There's a checkpoint here, and a checkpoint here, and then there's Key Largo. That's the first leg. The second leg is to Sebastian Inlet. There are no checkpoints in between. You just get to Sebastian, you sign the book, and you can keep going. Then the next is at Amelia Island, north of Jacksonville. And then the last one is at Cedar Key. So you present yourself with your boat at these checkpoints, you sign in, and then you can do whatever you want. You can sleep, you can eat, you could keep going. So that's my boat on a, I got out of the boat, and this is one of the sandbanks on the Swanee River. What's really cool about the Swanee is in the upper areas of the Swanee, it's as white as snow, and when you do it at night, you can come around one of these bends, and the sandbanks are on the bends, and it's just like it just lights up the night. When we did this race, there was no moon, and so there was very little light, but it was interesting and sometimes eerie to come around a bend and just all this white.
Alligators?
Yeah, they're alligators. If you paddle in Florida,
Yeah.
there's no, you really don't, yeah.
That was going to be my question. Was there any eerie wildlife that frightened you, like manas or anything? Did you experience any of those? 'Cause
Yeah.
I just saw this documentary about this unknown species in Florida rivers. where
Unknown
it's-
species of what?
They don't know what it is, but it's
Well, in 2 weeks I'm going on this. I'd like to
They
know.
think it's some sort of new spawn of either it's an extinct animal that isn't extinct and is resurfacing, or it's some kind of huge manta / seal porpoise. But it seems to be it's been seen. If
You
give
better
me your
not
email, I'll
go.
send you the documentary.
Are they? Yeah.
Or I'll get your email.
Does it eat people?
No, it does not seem dangerous. It was on Monster Hunters. They were trying to find it.
Okay, so
So-
you've heard of Sasquatch,
Yeah.
right?
No, but they have video of this already.
Yeah, but I mean, in the Everglades they talk about the swamp ape, but that's different. Which river?
Oh, it was South Florida.
South Florida.
Are you in? Yeah.
Okay, because in North Florida, in the Swanee, and I didn't know this until I was actually in the race, but there's sturgeon, like 6-foot sturgeon.
That's what they suspect. They think maybe it's a sturgeon. There's like 5 theories of what it is, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Well, I saw a sturgeon come out of the water, and I would worry about it. As long as it doesn't come down on me, but if it comes down on you, but there are a lot of people up on the Swanee who get hit by these sturgeon. And they are dangerous, actually. And you do think about it as you're headed down. So maybe it's a sturgeon. But there are a lot of things. Rays will come out. Big 6-foot ray, 6-foot wingspan will come out. And anybody who's done a fair amount of boating, you see them come out. They'll flap their wings and they'll go back in. Now, if they did that and come right into you, it's a problem. There was a grandfather was fishing with his grandson right near Fort Lauderdale, and one of these rays came out, and the barb stuck him in the chest, like Steve Irwin, except they kept the barb in, and the guy lived. So
Still walking around with the barb.
no, but they left it in until they could get him to the emergency room. But there are one of the things that surprised me about doing this. Every time you turn a corner, there's some new thing that's kind of a threat or something that you're thinking about. I mean, down here it's Burmese pythons, which, pythons, popular pets in South Florida, they grow too big, they eat the cat, people get angry. The python they let the python loose here, the python meets a girlfriend, the next thing you know, there are pythons everywhere, and I mean everywhere, and they're big. And so, for some reason, I'm down here camped in the race, and I'm thinking about a python. I'm in my jungle hammock thinking about a python when I should be sleeping to be able to paddle further down. But there are crocodiles, saltwater crocodiles, down in this area and in this area. They're just like alligators, just like normal alligators. Normal alligators are shy. When they see you, they'll go down and they'll leave you alone, as long as you leave them alone. And crocodiles is the same way. There are sharks, and you see sharks. You think about sharks, particularly at night when it's dark and your boat. There's just not much there, so a shark could come up and crunch the boat, but it didn't happen to me, despite my name.
You're right. I'm
Yeah.
channeling your wife. Why do you want to do this again?
This is just the 300-mile race. It's not the 1,200-mile race. Yeah.
What about your sleeping arrangements, basically, throughout? And did you ever sleep in a bed or get any respite that way? And what about your communications with the outside world?
Yeah. Well, back then we didn't have the transmitter, so what I had to do was report my position at least once every 24 hours. And so I would call my girlfriend by cell phone. And in areas where there was no cell phone coverage, we kind of got, we were allowed to miss a day. They would they would know that we were somewhere in there, but everywhere else, if I could get a cell phone call out, I would call in, I'd turn on my GPS and give my coordinates. And that, you'd have to do that or be disqualified. And so that's the way they tracked us back then. Now it's much more interesting because it's going to come up every 20 minutes. And so you'll see things like, why is that guy stuck right there? Why, you'll be able to see, progress or the lack of progress. And you can sort of see how the weather conditions are affecting the progress of various boats. But let's see now, what's
Sleeping conditions.
yeah, sleeping. Okay, so basically, what you want to do is camp, and I use a jungle hammock with no-see-um fly. So all I need are 2 trees and a place to pull the boat up. You want to get. My strategy was to try to get everything done in 4 hours, 5 hours. So I would, and this would happen in the dark. I would pull up to a beach, string the hammock up. I'd get out my food. I'd start boiling water. I'd take off the wet paddling clothes. I would get out a dry bag with dry camp clothes that I'd never wear paddling. You put on the dry clothes. By then the water's boiling. You pour the water into the thing. You get out your sleeping bag. You put it in the hammock. You eat your meal. You repack the boat so that raccoons won't get into it or rats. You get into the hammock. You sleep. You wake up. Hopefully 3 hours, 4 hours later. You get back in the boat. You pack everything up. You get back in the boat and go. Hopefully it's still dark. That's the ideal. Now there were times when I slept in a motel or hotel. Let's see, Amelia Island. I did. It's a checkpoint, and at the checkpoint you can get help from people in your, And so I actually got a ride and went to a hotel.
Play little golf?
No, it was actually that. I mean, that one was after some of the roughest stuff that happened. It was headwind and cold front and all kinds of terrible things, it was a really well coordinated stop because I went to a laundromat, put all my clothes, and I mean, you saw how many clothes I had. Well, all I had was a pair of nylon pants and a sweatshirt. All of my other clothes were in the washing machine. So went over to the grocery store, got fresh vegetables and stuff, went to a restaurant, ate a meal, went back to the laundromat, put the stuff in the dryer, did something else, and then went to the hotel, went to sleep, woke up before dawn, and got back and launched. It was fantastic. And the other time, and this was a strategy, down on the lower Swanee, I had discovered that there's a motel right on the river, and there's a boat ramp. And so I could pull my boat up right there and have a room in a motel. And there was a restaurant across the street, so I planned on stopping there rather than trying to find a camp spot. Once you get further south than here, the river's wide and it's marshy on both sides. It's very hard to find dry land. And so I figured if I stopped there and stayed in that motel, got a good night's sleep, I could get down here the next day. And of course I already told you that there was all this bad weather coming in. So what actually happened is I did in fact get to that motel. But by the time I got there, the restaurant across the street had closed, and I couldn't get to sleep. You're in a bed, and you just can't, because I was thinking about this storm. And so sometime after midnight, I got to sleep. But I woke up, I don't know, around 3, and I went, and I left. So I got 3 hours of sleep for in the motel room. But I did take a warm shower, and it was a stop. But other than that, I think the rest of the time there were 1 or 2 times when I slept in the sand next to the boat because there wasn't any place to put a hammock up. Yeah.
Same boat this time?
Oh yeah, for this race? Yeah. I'm in the same boat. Yeah. So this is me just before the launch. This is just before the beginning of the race. And the reason I show this is, if you can, maybe you can see a little bit of body language. My left shoulder was, I couldn't have done that. But I'm smiling.
Are you happy?
Yeah. Oh.
Jaws.
I don't know how that got there. So this is Wizard in his boat. I think it's a beautiful boat. This is him on the launch beach. This shows you how small it is. And these are the wings. This is the keel. There's one on each side, and it turns over the side, and so you can imagine you can sail in about 3 feet of water.
Oh, it is. Bathtub, refrigerator.
This is the toughest guy you will ever meet.
Look at your bed sheet. Did you use an alarm for to manage your sleeping, or was it just free form?
Yeah, I decided not to. Before the race, about a month before the race, I went completely off caffeine. I was very careful about this. I didn't want anything interfering with my ability to sleep, and so and I didn't use an alarm. I had a watch that I would take in the hammock so I could see what time it was. Because frequently what would happen is I would get into the hammock and I would immediately fall asleep. And then I would immediately wake up, and I would wake up and think, wow, that was great. And then I would look at my watch and I've been asleep for 10 minutes. And that doesn't work. But what I wanted to do was I would go to sleep and I would tell myself, I really have to get going. I need to get up early. But I didn't want, if my body needed sleep, I wanted it to sleep. And so I didn't want to interfere with it. I was just going to let it happen. What always happened is I would tell myself, I really need to get up early, and I would get up early. And so I took that to mean, I'm probably doing okay. I would get whatever I'd get, 3 hours or 4 hours of sleep, and then keep going. And there was only one time when I did not sleep in a 24-hour period, and it was when I went from here to there. Yes?
Did you learn any new goal-setting techniques to achieve your paddling every day? To make it from your distance goals for your daily achievements? Or did you?
What? This is going to be odd because and a lot of people will disagree with me, but my approach in doing this race was to ask permission to go. So I would get to a point, a difficult place where it might be dangerous, and I would ask permission.
Ask yourself?
I would, yes, I would just ask the question. May I proceed? In fact, the way I put it is the door open.
And did you ever get a no?
Yeah, I did.
Yes.
Yeah, and the hardest thing is to stop right then, because you could keep going, but no, yeah, and I stopped. So, but most of the time, you keep going, and I think there's power in momentum. You want to get momentum and keep your momentum. And if your mental outlook, and I mean it's much more important, your mental outlook and your emotional state, much more important than what you're feeling physically. Because I would go to the point of exhaustion and then something would happen and I would be completely revived, and I'd just keep going. The night just, you know, I mean, this just sounds like there are all kinds of weird things happen. Well, they do, you know. And if you've ever had any kind of sleep deprivation, you know, you do have periods of hallucinations and things, and so you have to be very careful about that. But no, it's really interesting how much falls away, and how are we doing for time?
We're good. We got a couple more questions?
Yeah.
Or?
I have a question. How much kayaking experience did you have before you did this race?
Yeah, I started kayaking this race was in 2006. I started in 2002.
Oh, okay.
So I had about 4 years, but I'd done this race a few times.
Oh, okay.
And so I knew I could do 300 miles, and I knew about how to do that. What I didn't know is whether I could do 4 times that, and in all these places. And I didn't know what physically would happen sitting in a kayak that long. You know, there were questions about whether your legs would swell and whether you'd develop all kinds of physical issues. There are a lot of people who have gone longer distances, but I'm not aware of anybody who's done this distance in this amount of time, at this pace. And so there wasn't really anything you could do to go find out, and it wouldn't matter anyway because everyone's so individual. You know, what might work for somebody may not work for somebody else, particularly a 50-year-old, you know, idiot. Yeah.
What was your average sleep per night over 30 days?
Average sleep. Oh, I don't know. Maybe 4 or 5 hours. Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't take 30 days, did you?
No. No.
Or less.
Or less. Yeah. No, it didn't take 30 days. It was not that. It was fast. I averaged. Okay, so you have to do 40. I averaged 60 a day. Yeah.
Besides knowing the 300 miles, did you do any recon for the rest of the trip to prepare?
Yes, I paddled in certain places, but there were places that I drove on this highway just to see what the highway looked like, and what a terrible idea that was. Because you look at that and you're like, oh no, this is just awful. It's a narrow road. There's no shoulder. There's nothing. It's just a narrow 2-lane road, and there are paper mills out there. This is rural Georgia, Florida, and these trucks loaded with trees, cut trees, come barreling down that thing, and if they don't move out of the way, that's it. Race over. And what's worse actually is, so I get all the way, I get all the way around, and I get to this point. I take the boat out, and I start walking across here, and I realize it's Friday. I think it was March 17. It's a Friday, so people are going off to the bar to get a little drink. But it was March 17, which was St. Patrick's Day. And I'm like, oh, what a perfect day to walk across the narrow road into the dark. The other thing about that, the portage is, I can't imagine what the drivers were thinking coming the other way. And out here in the middle, and suddenly there's a guy pulling a kayak out in the middle of nowhere. In fact, yeah, because my strategy to do this was I got out in the afternoon. I walked until about 10 o'clock at night. I found a grove of pine trees, got in a hammock, and slept. because I wanted to get up really early. So then I got up around 2:30 and kept walking because there's nobody out there then. And, there were, I don't know how many cars, but not many, maybe one an hour. And that was my real strategy. And so I covered most of it in that time. But I did stop. There's a bridge, there's a little creek. And I stopped on the bridge and cooked a meal. And this is why I have this idea of what in the world were they thinking? Because I'm on this bridge, and I have this spoonful of turkey tetrazzini, and I'm like, a truck. You could see me in his headlights, and I'm just anyway. And there's also an agriculture. There's also an agriculture station when you're. I don't know whether it's for Florida or for Georgia, but it's right at the border. And I come up to the agriculture station, and I'm thinking, you spend a lot of time worrying about getting hassled by the authorities. What are you doing out here? What are you, an idiot? Yes. So I'm thinking, oh, this cop this is not going to be good. He's going to want to know why I'm dragging this boat into Georgia. And so I'm walking along, and they have lights to shine on the trucks, I guess. And I get into the lights, and the guy looks over at me. It's the middle of the night, it's whenever it was, early in the morning, dark. And he looks over at me, and I look over at him, and I wave. He waved back. That's it. So, no problem. Yeah.
Did you listen to music or have books on tape or anything to keep you going?
Yeah, this is a really important thing. I had a little radio, and so I would listen to the radio, and that was really, really important. I didn't have books on tape because the conditions were, this was a cheap little Walkman radio, and if I flipped or something, But what happened is right up in here, the earphones gave out, and it was like, oh no, what am I gonna do? So I finally got a replacement, but yeah, in fact, I had from the radio, I had several, particularly in the Daytona area. I went through Daytona and was just totally exhausted, just north of Daytona. And then I tuned into, I think it's 95.7 The Hog, which is a classic rock station. And I mean, it just comes out of nowhere in these earphones. And, I'm like really tired. And the problem is in there, it's all bulkheaded, it's all concrete. And there isn't any place you don't want to try to get out of after you've gone this distance in a kayak, you don't want to try to climb up on a bulkhead. And so I knew there wasn't any place real close by to get out. But here comes this music. And they played this line of music that was just unbelievable. And the boat, literally, I could have pulled water skiers. And I came out, and it's strange because I remember these things vividly. I moved right through this really dark area, and in the distance I could see lights coming down on a bridge. And there was a guy casting for snook. This is a game fish in Florida, a tropical game fish. And you go out and you fish at night for him. You can fish at night for him. He's out there casting for snook, and I see him. The lights are just coming down like this, and there's a bridge, and I'm figuring, well, I must go right under the bridge. And so I aim for the bridge, and this song, American Pie, is on. And I'm singing. And I come flying through that bridge, and that guy was like hiding behind the fridge because I'm like, bye. But it just totally, that's why I say, you know, you go through these kind of, these periods, and that radio got me through this, and I got way, way up the course that way.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you very much.